Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. You would not believe what I just went through to get this camera set up. It's so silly and I've missed you guys so much, but I moved and honestly, life has been busy as well as not really knowing how to set my camera up. I'm in like an office library situation for me. Is this interesting? Anyway, the lighting is not great. So anytime I've gone to film, I've been like, how do I situate myself? My books are over there. This is like a dresser I keep my clothes in. All that to say, I miss you guys and I'm happy to be back. I hope that this setup feels a little bit like something I can do more frequently because I just haven't been inspired and that's so sad. I wanted to chat with you guys today because I wanted to talk to you about all my favorite fall things. 'Tis the season. I'm such a pumpkin spice girl. We're getting into that kind of cozy weather. I don't like the rain. I will say, just full transparency, I'm not a rain girl. I don't like it when it gets on my face. It actually really irritates me. So besides the rain, I love everything else. I love a crunchy leaf. I love a chilly morning. I love a cozy show. So I thought that we could just chat and hang out and I could tell you some of my favorite fall things. And then you guys could tell me some of yours down below. Fall to me means melancholy. It's like the end of the year is coming, things are winding down, the happily ever afters aren't as frequent anymore. Winter, you kind of need like the coziness of a happily ever after, that like warm, cozy romance to get you through that seasonal depression. Fall to me is the time to feel bleak because you're still comforted by sometimes getting a good weather day, you know? So I thought that I'd share with you some of my favorite movies and TV shows and books, of course, and also some recipes that I love for fall. Let's get right into it. I wrote my little notes on a post-it so I wouldn't forget what I was gonna say. This is actually the reason I wanted to film this. My actual favorite show in the entire world is Girls. You can find it on HBO or just Max now, but you can find it on Max. Lena Dunham stars and she is this awkward and quirky pseudo narcissist and all of her friends fall in the same boat, and it's 6 seasons of them, I think it's 6 seasons of them just bumbling along in their early to mid 20s. This show is primarily about Hannah Horvath, which is Lena Dunham's character, and her relationships and her professional development and mishaps and her friendship development and mishaps. And you meet all of her friends. You meet her best friend and roommate Marnie, who's in a relationship. You meet her friend Shoshana, who is this like neurotic type, and you meet her friend Jessa, who is just this like global traveler, free spirit, and of course you get a lovely Adam Driver arc through basically the whole series, and he is just he's so touch her and you'll die, and he's so stupid brain but like so intelligent and just, oh god, I love it. It's so good. And I know that people have certain feelings about Lena Dunham. However you feel, that's totally fine. But the show, you cannot criticize the show. It's so good. And if you have not watched it, it's set in New York City. It's so aching and heartbreaking. Like, you'll laugh at the ridiculousness of these characters and you'll also cry because you just want them to succeed and want them to do better, and they just seem incapable. It is my favorite show of all time. The next show that to me screams fall watch is The Patient, starring Steve Carell. If you have not watched this limited series on Hulu, please go watch it. Steve Carell in it, he plays a very serious role. He's a therapist. He starts to see a serial killer, and this serial killer kind of comes to him under false pretenses, but the serial killer wants to get better. Steve Carell very quickly figures out that maybe there's not as much transparency and honesty as there needs to be in the therapist-client relationship, so he dismisses him, only to then find himself being kidnapped by the serial killer because the serial killer wants to get better so bad. It's so beautiful and it's so heartbreaking and it's so sad, and like you see these two characters get shoved into this situation where both of them wants help and both of them wants to escape the chains of their own surroundings. How do you get out of a situation like that on either part alive? This show has fundamentally changed the way that I think about the song West Virginia, Mountain Mama, you know, don't flag me for copyright. That song gets played in some very dire moments in the show, and if you like kind of like a spooky mystery thriller vibe, I do think that you should check it out. It's on Hulu, I believe, and let me know if you've watched it and like it. The final show is like total levity but still total fall vibes, is Schitt's Creek on Netflix, and I feel like most people have seen the show, and if you haven't seen the show, I'm sure you've used a gif or two from this show. Iconic. It's about a family, like a riches to rags type story, where this family essentially loses all of their wealth and they have to go live in a small town, have no idea how to behave in a small town. They've only known privilege their entire lives. Eugene Levy plays the straight man in this show as this dad who's trying to like steer his family in the right direction after falling from grace, clinging back up to where they were before, realizing along the way that maybe they don't want to be back where they were before. You meet this lovely cast of small town characters and the hijinks that they all get up to. You have love stories, you have character development, and the final seasons of this show, you've spent so long with these absolute ding-dongs just failing to be normal people, and they all reach this point where they're so close to it. Do I choose the easy way, or do I choose the way that I know is going to make me happy? While having these like hilarious episodes it's beautiful. And if you're like a light TV watcher, you should definitely watch Schitt's Creek if you haven't, and if you have watched it, this is my reminder, it's time for a rewatch. Let's talk about my favorite fall recipes. I have 3 for you today. One is just a very simple Dutch oven, no knead bread. And I got this recipe from Acre Homestead. She has a website called Scratch Pantry that you can go get this recipe from. And it's 4 ingredients. It's literally water, yeast, flour, salt. It's super easy. You prep it at night, pop it in the oven in the morning, and it makes the best rustic bread. If you don't have a sourdough starter, and if you don't want to spend all day fiddling with like rising and kneading, all that stuff, it's an awesome recipe and it turns out delicious every time. I will say, I used to live on the West Coast and now I live closer to the East Coast. And on the West Coast, you add 1.5 cups of water. If you're on the East Coast, I would dial that water back just a little bit. I made it this morning, but it was so wet. I had to add so much extra flour once I started kneading it because it was just goo, like I just made goo, but it turns out perfect every time. My second recipe that I recommend for the fall are chocolate chip pumpkin muffins. This is my fiance's favorite thing that I ever make. He requests it every fall, and it's a very simple pumpkin muffin recipe topped with a streusel. I kind of combined 2 recipes, so I'll link the 2 down below or write them out down below so that you can see them. You take a pumpkin chocolate chip muffin recipe, and what I do is I dial back the spices added because I think it calls for like 2 teaspoons of pumpkin seasoning, and in my opinion you don't really need that much to let the flavors of the pumpkin and the chocolate chips shine. I don't love pumpkin and chocolate mixed together, or pumpkin spice and chocolate mixed together, so I dial back on that seasoning, and then I just have like a really simple streusel topping that you pop on top of the muffins, and there you go. I love them frozen. I'm a frozen muffin girl, so I pop them in the freezer and then just have them at any time, but they keep for like a week on your counter, so you can double the recipe down below. I think it calls for slightly less than 1 can of pumpkin, but you can just use 1 can of pumpkin and it turns out totally fine. Final fall recipe that I would like to recommend is a caramel apple cheesecake blondie. I cannot remember who wrote this recipe, but I found it on TikTok, I think like 2 or 3 years ago now. And I'm not even kidding you. This is the best dessert, point blank period, that you will ever make. You can make different iterations of it, but it is a apple blondie base topped with a cheesecake and then dripped in like a maple glaze. It is heaven. And the best part of this is you can truly customize this recipe to whatever you want. I made it for my best friend a couple of years ago and she makes it now, but she like doubles the apples. You can also, instead of doing a 9x13, you can condense it to a 9x9 and make it this really thick, dense kind of bread. You don't even need the cheesecake topping if you don't like it, but I love it. It's so light and fluffy and just adds this delicate sweetness to it. It takes a little bit of extra finessing. It is not like a I would say, beginner recipe. These kind of go in order of like easy, medium, more difficult, but it is worth it. And if you can follow a recipe, you can make this no problem. It's so good. It's so good. That's all. Let's get into the books of it all, shall we? These are the books that to me scream fall. Not necessarily happily ever after. Or maybe there is some happily ever afters, but it is in that kind of realistic way. Isn't always like sparkles and fairy tales, you know? My first fall book recommendation is The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This is a relatively short book. I think it's technically horror. Sure. We love. And it is about this family. Two fathers and their daughter go vacation kind of in a desolate area to get away from the world. While the daughter is playing outside, a man approaches and essentially says like, hey, what's your name? Who are you? How are you? We need to talk to your dad. He's by himself. We need to talk to your dads. We need their help. You have to help us save the world. What ensues is this like captivating small cast of characters horror novel that has maybe a touch of the occult, a touch of otherworldliness, a story about family and what you would give up in the name of others. It's a short book, but it packs a punch and it gives that kind of ooky, spooky, what's going to happen feeling, and I highly recommend it. Read this book. Oh, next is one of my favorite books of this year, and it's Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. This is fall romance to me. This is the pinnacle of melancholy, realistic, real world characters. This is the one. If you like meandering, ne'er-do-well characters fumbling to find their footing and their love interests, and those love interests not being perfect, this is the book for you. So it follows two best friends, Alice and Eileen. They've been best friends from college, and essentially they just correspond now mostly through email. Alice is a novelist and she moves to a small town and she meets Felix and they go on a date and it doesn't go well. It is so dating app culture, the first chapter of this book. You see their story develop and what happens and how Alice is like a little better than, and how Felix is not afraid to call her out for that, and how Felix isn't the perfect character. And then on the other hand, you have Eileen and Simon. Eileen, who met Simon as a young girl. I think he's like 6 years older than she was, and they met when she was a child, and she's always kind of pined for him. And she's also on the heels of a bad breakup, kind of this will they, won't they, go for it sort of thing. And there's a spicy scene in this book. I hate to even say that. It's not. It's like a lovemaking scene in this book that truly is the best that I've ever read. It's so realistic and it's so beautiful, and there's like these descriptions of the sounds of the city around them before they enter into this scene, and then the chapter ends with the sounds of the city, but it's like transformed a little bit in their togetherness. Oh my god, I love this book. It's so good. It's so nothing. This book is so nothing. I have heard that maybe the audiobook isn't the best way to go, and I understand that because Sally Rooney's sentence structure I think you just have to see it. She doesn't use quotation marks. Dialogue is swept into the narrative of the book. If you like a realistic fiction that is kind of about nothing and everything all at once, read this book. We're gonna move into kind of a speculative fiction here. The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. This is a fun book. This is like less heavy and more enjoyable on a surface level. That sounded bad. But more, I think, palatable on a surface level than the last two books I talked about. This book is about a woman who goes out to a bachelorette party, comes home, and finds a husband in her house. The pictures on her walls are all about it's the two of them together. Her phone has him in her text messages, but she's never met him. That husband goes up into the attic and down pops another husband. This book is so fun, but it also has this yearning quality as she chases after what could be the perfect husband. And what if I just got rid of the best thing that's ever going to happen to me? But what if 2 people from now I'm going to be the happiest I've ever been? and how do you know when to stop, and how to stop that person from leaving you once you've got them. And on top of that, this does a really good job of exploring time loop science, right? Because I think we've all read those books that has like a time loop and you're like, wouldn't you just try that just to see? Like, wouldn't you want to know if you could get out of it? This main character does that. She tries to break it. The end of this book is beautiful. I cried. You really feel for the character by the end of this, and you get to stay with her for such a long time and see her through so many iterations of what's happening in here. I did give this book 5 stars, and I think that you will too. I've got to say Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. When I read this book, I was like 5 stars, immediate 5 stars. I think I read it in like January or February of 2022. This book is about our main character, Ari, right? Yeah, Ari. She's a weather girl and she kind of has a toxic work environment. Her boss is married to her other boss and they're kind of going through a divorce. And so her work life is not going the way that she wanted it to. And she loves being a weather girl. She loves the rain, this like kind of atmospheric, I really want to succeed in doing my job, but I'm in this situation where I can't. And then she teams up with the sports guy. Is his name? Is it Jake? Russell! Dang it. Russell is such a better name for him than Jake. And they kind of plan to get these two either back together or to separate entirely. And the goal is like, we need a better work environment. We're not happy here. We don't want to leave because we love our jobs, but these two need to figure their work out. And obviously it's like a little team, a little romance. It's so good. The main character in this book has depression, and I feel like that adds another level of depth to the book. And Russell, this kind of complex male character, and the spice in this book is really good. It's like a rainy day read. If you like a well-developed character that's not surface level, everything's great. This is not your typical Grumpy Sunshine or Black Cat Golden Retriever. These are just two characters who are doing their best in the situations at hand, and they find themselves falling together. One last ooky spooky book for these recs, and that is Gillian Flynn's Sharp Objects. There is, I think it's Hulu or it's Max that does this book, and it does it well too, but I wish that I had read the book first. This book is about a journalist fresh out of rehab. She's fresh out. She gets called back to her hometown because one little girl had gone missing, was found murdered, I think a year ago or a couple months ago, and then another little girl just went missing, and they're trying to find that little girl before inevitably it's too late to find her alive. Camille starts to investigate another kind of seedy underbelly of this rich, affluent city and what it does to little girls, who it forces them to turn into, and how you allow boys to behave in a small town. So intense. It's short, like it's a quick little book, and there's a TV show if you'd rather watch that instead of read it. Some of the reveals in here, they're good. You should read this book. You should watch it. And last but certainly not least, a book from this year that I simply must recommend. This is Not in Love by none other than Miss Allie Hazelwood. She's a fall read, okay? It came out in early spring, I believe, and you best believe I read it in like 0.2 seconds. We might be doing a reread here soon. You meet Rue, who is this, she's got a touch of the tism, who has very strict boundaries. Rue has trauma in spades, and she works for a science organization. So stupid. She works for a company, does a lot of food science, and her goal is to come up with a way to protect food from going bad. She meets up with our main character, Eli. I think maybe like a blind dating app situation. They meet up. Things don't go perfect that night, but they kind of are like, I know we said this was a one-time thing, but like maybe we should. I just feel like we vibe, but then they get thrown in together in a work situation. His company is essentially coming in to like take over her company. It is a hostile takeover. We enter into like a little lab love affair. This is a spicy, smutty little book. She is that girl. If you don't like it, you're going to be skipping a lot of pages. I feel like in a lot of books that tend to be more spice heavy, you're not getting character development through that spice. You're just, okay, we get it. You're banging here, banging there, banging everywhere. This is not that book. The reason that these two are intimate, it pushes not only the story forward, but it pushes the characters forward. It's so good. Okay? And you know, that's just what I love in a book. I love a flawed character. I love somebody that you can go, I wish you would not maybe make that decision right now. But you realize why they do it. I don't like a character who makes dumb decisions. I like a character who makes dumb decisions for good reason. Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. 5 stars. Wow. Okay, I talked a lot. I'm literally going to take you off my tripod, go get my laptop, edit away, hopefully post this today. Wouldn't that be fun? Me and you, we're back in business. I'm so excited to have told you about all my favorite fall things. If you have read or watched or ate any of these things, please let me know down below. If you have any fall book faves or movies or TV show faves, you see that I'm a girl who loves a melancholy moment. Send that my way if you have those recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. We are so back, and I'll see you next time. Bye!